Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today guys, it is the day of the reckoning and I'm talking about EA, Electronic Arts, which stock has plunged into oblivion by 20% after admitting that Dragon Age the Veilguard has underperformed by a staggering of 50%. Guys, this is what happens when you put forward your politics and your virtual signaling and you pander to the DEI agenda and then you try to sell games to people, to gamers, which are not the modern audience which you think they are on the market. This is just crazy. So literally over this morning, Electronic Arts is facing a financial crisis in epic proportions, with EA stock dropping nearly 20% after the company openly admitted that the Veilguard and FC25 failed. Especially the Veilguard, their sale estimates were down by 50%, so they admitted that their sales expectations were missed by nearly 50%. That is a lot. So effectively they expected to have around 3 million players during the first quarter of the sale. They only had 1.5 million players, so they expected to sell at least 3 million copies minimum, and they missed the goal. Now, this shows why the director of Dragon Age the Veilguard has left the ship, because literally right now BioWare is under extremely high scrutiny. The sharp decline over the Electronic Arts share price began earlier this week, with EA stock plunging on January 22nd from $142 to $125 in a single day. Then the bleeding continued on the 23rd of January. Now it's bottoming to $116 before clawing back to a slightly above level of $118. These numbers represent a staggering blow to a company once seen as a pillar of stability in the gaming industry. This is exactly what happened to BioWare, to Ubisoft. It's exactly the same thing we've seen with Ubisoft. They went up, and then once they started implementing their DEI politics and also trying to sell these microtransactions, which are basically microaggressions to gamers from every single player game, they went from top to bottom in a matter of 5 years. EA's current predicament was entirely avoidable, with many pointing to mismanagement at BioWare and the company's broader embrace for diversity, equity, and inclusion agendas as a root cause for its struggles. Dragon Age the Veilguard, which was supposedly to be a triumphant return to the beloved RPG franchise, also fell below expectation, despite projections that it would sell 3 million copies at release and a crazy 10 million over its entire life cycle. This is what the analysts estimated. The game only engaged 1.5 million players by 31st of December 2024, and the number is not going to increase after that, because most likely many players will not buy this game anymore because they've seen it's an absolute crazy mess of wokeness. The troubles don't end there. EA Sports FC25, the rebranded successor for FIFA franchise, has also underperformed. A crucial slowdown in sales over the Christmas period compounded the company's financial woes, forcing it to adjust its annual revenue projections downwards by hundreds of millions of dollars. Guys, it's crazy. The situation in BioWare is also particularly troubling. The studio, once renowned for masterpieces like Dragon Age Origins, Jade Empire, Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3, is now seen as a shell of its former self. Meanwhile, insider reports from Smash JT and Grooms suggest BioWare Edmonton headquarters may be on the chopping block, with EA allegedly preparing to shutter the studio entirely as part of a broader cost-cutting measure. EA's reliance on the live service models, rebranding efforts, and a focus on the identity politics appears to be eroding the goodwill it once enjoyed with the players. The company's strategy has not only alienated portions of its fanbase, but also has failed to deliver the financial returns investors expected in the company, which again, guys, I am not surprised whatsoever. EA is left scrambling to recover from the double blow dealt by Dragon Age the Veilguard and EAFC Sports. The company's updated revenue forecast for the fiscal year now sits between 7 billion and 7.15 billion, a very sharp decline from its original forecast of 7.5 to 7.8. That is a massive decrease in a company which just a few years ago was seen as an extremely stable company. But this is what happens if you release enough woke games. Well, guess what? Your company is going to go bankrupt sooner or later, and we are just seeing the exact same thing we saw with Ubisoft, which is happening right now in front of us. And do you guys remember what happened at the release of the game for Dragon Age the Veilguard, when many of these so-called, analysts and press, they were like publishing the all-time peak players and showing that we have 89,000 people are playing simultaneously, look at this is a success. It's like, and they would putting these to own the chuds, right? Whereas we all know that is a complete utter failure for a AAA game. Guys, this is really important to understand this. A AAA game which does not have a minimum of at least 150,000 concurrent players is an utter failure, because the investment that goes into these games is crazy, and I mean crazy. So you cannot say that a AAA game which has a peak concurrent players of like 89,000 people is actually successful. It is not. I remember Jason Schreier, which posted a tweet on X where he said, "Oh, look at this, owning the chuds," and then he actually deleted the tweet because he realized that, yeah, the game was absolutely toast and the figures, they were not growing any further. And guess what? That's what happened. It never went beyond the maximum of 89,000 players which are on Steam. Now, guys, the question is the following: what can EA do to salvage the situation? Well, very important. I mean, Trump already banned all the DI initiatives in America, so many corporations and companies, I'm pretty sure they're going to follow suit. So this era of wokeness, it may actually end very soon. This era of basically pandering to a specific agenda, to a to gender identity, to all these things which gamers do not want in their game. They don't want to play a game where you have to play and watch a cutscene where the character is telling you that they are non-binary in a medieval fantasy environment, and do push-ups to apologize to misgendering people in a video game. If you do that, gamers are gonna shut it down, sell the game, and never play your franchise ever again in the history of gaming. And this is exactly what has happened with Dragon Age the Veilguard. The game will never reach a sell figure of 10 million copies over its life cycle, because people are not buying it anymore. People played it. I mean, there were obviously hardcore fans which already played the game, they finished the game, and that's it. You are not going to invite any other players or potential players into your game to play it, because people don't want to play a DEI slop, and that is the problem. So, as the director of also the Lords of the Fallen has put on a tweet a few days ago, very important, it is always fundamental to separate your identity politics and your worldviews of politics from video games. If you want to use it, then create your own studio, make your own game, and try to sell it, but don't hijack a company with your politics as an employee and try to force your agenda, because what's going to happen, where you're going to basically make the company go bankrupt, you're going to be fired eventually anyway, and also your CV is going to be looking like pretty crappy when people want to hire you and you're going to tell them you worked on this game as a director, for example, they will be like, no thanks, we don't want to have another failure on our hands, because politics should be kept for oneself, and when you work for a company, you should basically work for the company to produce the game as the company envisions it to make the maximum amount of profit. So guys, that's it for today's video on this one. Absolutely shocking, but to be honest, it is what they caved for themselves. I mean, EA did this to themselves with their own hand, because they lost control, they gave in to the DI agenda, to the DI, basically pandering, to the woke pandering, and this is what happens when you do that. It's pretty obvious, and if you have any analysts, any press denying it, They are in denial because they cannot accept the truth, because effectively right now they are screaming to high heavens because the truth came out and they don't want to accept it. But let the truth shine, let it be in front of everyone, because this is how things should be. Black and white and obvious. We cannot continue like this. Games have to be created without this pandering, this agenda, and this ideology politics, because gamers don't play games for this. They play games for entertainment and for escaping the crappy reality of daily life. That's why gamers play games, so they don't want to be reminded of the real life politics in a fantasy game. Right guys, that's it for today's video. As always, see you later in the next one.